Hi there, and welcome to this short little video explaining propositions and propositional logic in moral reasoning. Our textbook this week takes us through looking at the differences between absolute moral values and relative moral values. And of course, so much of our reality is shaped by language, how we understand and how we communicate thoughts and ideas is all through language. So any philosophical discussion about morality does tend to have to use logic as a way to express itself as succinctly as philosophers like to be. So consider propositions and logic a bit of a tool of the trade. So the purpose of this video is just to give you some alternate explanations to the things that you're reading in the text. So to start off, propositions are basically statements that are meaningful and they describe states of affairs. So they are occurrences, events, or happenings. So propositions do tend to be either true or false. If I were to say to you, at this moment, it is nighttime, that would be absolutely false, because you could take a look around my kitchen here and see that there is daylight. And if I were to even further give you some proof, if we look around outside, it is certainly daylight. So propositions are things that are either true or they are false. So a true proposition, as we just saw, it describes a state of affairs that was or is occurring. A false proposition, of course, is describing a state of affairs that did not occur or is not occurring. And only propositions are true and false, never the actual state of affairs. So it can't not be day or not be night. That is a logical impossibility. So it's only the proposition that is true or false, not the actual fact and object of the proposition. You with me so far? Okay. So in order to understand how moral absolutism works and why logic would be an important component to that understanding, we do have to accept the fact that truth is absolute. Truth is not relative to belief. So let's say I were in a state where I just firmly believed that it was nighttime right now. And with all my heart, I believed that it was night. Well, ostensibly speaking, it's still daytime, even if I do believe it's nighttime. So truth is purely absolute. There are several types of propositions. Sorry, my cat is now wanting our attention. And it's true, there's a cat over there. Sorry for the distraction. So, back to my point. There are several types of propositions. The first set of propositions are what we call analytic propositions. And analytic propositions are truths that are known to be absolute. We don't need to, at every instance of seeing the object or happening, we don't have to see it case by case in order to know that it's always true. So for example, take triangles. Triangles, by their very definition, are three-sided figures. They always have three sides, and they always will. That is just the truth of that object. Another way to think of it is how objects are known by being related to each other. So these two deliciously ripening pears are pears. This pear is this pear. These are the same object. They belong to the same family of objects. This is not a pear. This is a very tasty apple. Apples are not pears, and pears are not apples. So this is also another form of these absolute truths. That looks really good, doesn't it? I'll save it for later. So those are examples of analytic propositions. Another set of propositions are what we call internal sense or emotive propositions. And these are propositions that basically are statements of an internal belief. So if I were to say that I have a stomach ache right now and I don't feel all that well, I'm the only person who knows that truth. You can look at me and say, oh, well, you look all right to me. And that's because you don't have access to my internal sense proposition. Only I do. Empirical or external sense propositions are those propositions that state affairs or occurrences in the external world of which we have evidence through our external senses. So to say that there is some pears in the room, well, the way that you would validate that statement is to look for pears. And lo and behold, there they are. So that would be an example of external state. Moral propositions, which make up the real crux of what we're discussing this week, are propositions about morality. And these are types of propositions that have moral import. So an example of what a moral proposition would be the phrase, human beings should never eat other human beings. So what's interesting about moral propositions is that they typically have a few parts to them. So firstly, moral propositions are empirical and rational in form. These are things that we can validate. So we can look around, for example, and think about all the different cultures and all the different people of the world and see that, universally speaking, unless you're a zombie, eating people is considered pretty wrong. Another aspect of moral propositions is that they are largely found in larger classes of propositions that we call empirical. So moral propositions they don't tend to be internal sense propositions and are not often entirely able to be expressed as analytic propositions. So another aspect is some philosophers say that moral statements are not propositions at all, which of course poses some problems for the discussion. What they do instead is maintain that they're merely emotive utterances. So to say that eating people is wrong for this kind of moral theorist, for them is just how one feels about not wanting to eat people. But of course, and as you're going to be working through in some of the literature this week, there are some problems in thinking that. Because, well, we can't know this propositional form to be true or false. So the third alternative then is that it's not entirely conclusively provable that this sort of moral proposition can be empirical with moral import as being true or false. So it does tend to get pretty muddy when we look at these forms of moral propositions. Following that, though, we are confronted with the problem that matching our propositions with the complexity of human thought and ideals and feelings just often don't match up. Because, of course, we can take, for example, let's say that our class is going off on a trip into the mountains and we're flying on our plane and it crashes into a mountain and there's a few of us left, but it's unlikely that we will be saved if we don't eat. So some of us might decide that in these sort of life or death situations, it is morally permissible to eat other people. So, of course, our moral propositions can't be thought to cover every aspect and every alternative to our reasoning, including our feelings about the subject of moral propositions. But what you'll see and what you'll find in your own reflections when you work on your reflection this week is that at the end of the day, there are some basic moral principles that we do adhere to by using propositional logic and moral propositions. So, is morality absolute or is it relative? Well, I'm going to leave that up to your point of view and your decision after thinking about what we've talked about here in this little video and looking at the readings and some of the other examples that I've offered for this week. So that's the little ditty on moral propositions and propositional logic in general and moral reasoning. I hope this has cleared up some of your thinking, and if not, we'll suffer together because this is really hard stuff. So happy reasoning. See you later. I'm gonna eat this now. Bye.